So racism is not going to be tolerated, no profanity or derogatory language. We want to make sure that everyone is able to bring his or her authentic selves to the table. When we have discussions about race, we have to get accustomed to talking about tough issues. We have to be open-minded, practice empathy, and we want to make sure that everyone is able to bring his or her authentic selves to the table. So once we start this conversation, we want to make sure that the conversation continues. We want to ensure that you share this information on our website at Sharp Education Consulting. On Twitter at Sharp Education, on Instagram at Sharp Education, and also you can follow us on Facebook at Sharp Education Consulting. On Twitter, you can use the hashtag AllyReady. So think about this. Think about how you grew up. How does that have an impact on how you perceive things? You are born in a society where where a system of oppression exists. Think about, biases, stereotypes. How do those things impact on how you perceive life? You are receiving messages from your parents, from your friends, from your colleagues. How do those messages shape your values, your beliefs, your feelings, your attitudes, and your opinions? So the first thing we're going to think about is, who are you? You are multidimensional. Your race and gender are not the only dimensions that define you. Your ethnicity, your age, where you grew up, your sexual orientation, all those things have various factors on how you maneuver life. When we think about your social identity, we're talking about how the fraternity, the sorority you belong to, your political affiliation. How do those things impact on how you maneuver life? So in the chat box, what I would like for you to do is look at this page, and I want you to tell me which of these two identifiers are important to you. Yes, you may record this. Yes, you may record this class. Which of these two identifiers are important to you? Put it in the chat box. Your gender and age, race and gender, so gender and age, it seems like that's a common theme. Ethnicity and religion, race and ethnicity. So the other thing I want you to think about, which two identifiers are not that important to you? Which two identifiers are not that important to you? Age and position, age and nationality, position and age. That's interesting. Position seems to be a common theme. Each is a factor, but not the whole story. Good, because we're all multidimensional. The last question that I have for you is this. Which of, doesn't matter how many, but which of these identifiers impact how you perceive yourself? Like, which of these identifiers impact your self-perception? None at all. Okay. Anybody else? Sexual orientation, gender, race, ethnicity, and position. So we just talked about these things, but how do these social identifiers play a part in your privilege? So if you look at the very top of your chat box, there's a privilege handout. I want you to click on that privilege handout right now. If you, all of you go to the very top of the box, of the chat box, is a privilege handout. And what I want you to do is look at these, I want you to download that right quick. But before you do that, I'm gonna go over something for you. So we first have to think about what is privilege. Privilege is something that is unearned, something that you automatically have. When you think about advantages versus disadvantages, what type of advantages, disadvantages, social, economic, political advantages that you have over someone else? So I want you to look at the privilege sheet, and I want you to tell me, I want you to look at them. It's at the very top. If not, I'll go ahead and do it again. Okay, here we go. I'm about to do it right now. Okay. So I want you to open up that privilege sheet, and I want you to write down, I want you to tell me, what is your score? There are 10 privileges. I want you to write down your score. I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to do it now. And when you're done, you can put the thumbs up telling me that you're done so we can discuss.
I can't see it.
Huh? Do you see the privileged one right there? You see it in the chat box? So we want to make sure that everyone takes, because we're going to record it for the people who weren't able to attend. Oops, sorry. And when you're done, just write down your score so we can start discussing. Oh, 6, 2. Were there any surprises with some of you? So we got 2 people that are done. I think we got like almost 20 participants, about 17 people on here. Anyone else? If you could put your scores in the chat box. Seven. You don't see it?
No.
Okay, hold for 1 minute. That's it right there.
I seen it blinked, but it just went away.
Did you go ahead and click on it? You have to double click on it to open it up.
Okay.
Did you double click on it? Fire tablet?
Yeah, it's not opening up for some reason.
It didn't open up?
No.
Hold for 1 second.
I seen it blink, but it's not there.
She said, Kathy said she had to download her document in order for it to open. Did you download it? Where are you? Did you download it?
No.
So what you can, because you can, this is something I can email it to you and you can do it later. How does that sound?
Oh, that's fine.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll, Susan, we'll let you guys do it. So pretty much it had a list of different statements where we talked about, you know, we talked about, did you grow up in a two-parent household? That wasn't one of the questions, but it also talked about, did you grow up in a household where you were, your family were born here? Did you see yourselves in a positive light? So you'll be able to look at that in a little bit. Were there any type of reactions? Were any of the statements bother any of you who were the ones who were able to see it? Did anybody, was there any of the statements that kind of bothered you about your privilege? Anything that stood out to you? Any of them that bothered you? The ones who were able to take the assessment. Student loans, okay, that statement bothered you. Several bothered you. Gabby, you know which ones, can you give one example of which one that bothered you? Can everyone get them? What do you mean, Angela? Okay. 3, okay. So we know that some of these are bothersome, but unfortunately we have to have these discussions and we have to be aware of what our biases are. And we have to understand how this country was designed and how that impact on why things are the way they are today. So when we think about this, we got to think about the worldview. Who establishes the norm in society? And when we think about that, we live in a society that has pretty much been drawn by what our founding fathers purposely designed. So when you hear statements, my achievement have to do with me, not with the membership of the white group. No, we know that this country is designed that way. We know that internalized white superiority has an impact on why certain individuals are in power and why certain individuals are not in power. Where some people might make statements, if you guys can make sure that your your microphones are off. If you feel as if that you got something just because of your hard work and not based on the color of your race, where you feel as if that it's not fair, where it says equating acts of unfairness experienced by white people with systemic racism experienced by people of color, meaning that you're making the assumption that people are not, that you are able, that the reason why that you have able to get what you were able to get is because of your hard work and not because of your whiteness. Or I know one of the statements I hear a lot of time, oh, they should have made different, I have some made better decisions. And how does that have an impact on everything? They should have went to school. I went to school. They should not have had a child out of wedlock. I didn't do that. You know, those are things that where that internalized white superiority have come into play. The other says, I don't want to have uncomfortable conversations about race. I don't. I want to talk about it. Where they said, I didn't do it. That happened in the past. Forget about it. We shouldn't even be talking about it anymore. And where people think, especially when we think about affirmative action, where you just assume that certain race and equity benefits only benefit people of color. So as we talked about this norm, we have to think about cultural oppression. And we talk about what defines beauty. One thing has been a hot topic, especially within the last couple months, is colorism. And colorism is not something that just impact Black communities. It's also impact Latinx and also Indian communities too. How having Eurocentric features provided you more opportunities. And we think about how media also plays a major part on why things are the way they are. How the English language also, it plays a part where people who come to this country are not able to become their authentic selves because of assimilation. I mean, just think about it as, you know, some of us were brought here by force and some of us were brought here because we were looking for a better life. And how some of us have just shed who our true identities were in order for us to conform to the majority. and religion. Now, many of us think that the maps that we grew up on, seeing in grade school, is portraying the continents accurately, and that's not case. It's not the case. North America is not that big. You do the research. Jane Elliott, which is the social justice guru, she's a former educator, and she talked about that the maps that we see today are not accurate. And the reason why they were drawn up that way was because the Pope wanted to say, oh, this is how Christianity spread throughout the world, that there are a lot of people practice Christianity. And that is the case, that is true. Majority of the people in the world do practice Christianity. The second most popular religion in the world is Islam. So just think about the messages that you be hearing every day, especially those people that have been historically oppressed. You just start to internalize those negative messages. You start believing everything that people say about you. You end up having a lower self-esteem. You end up having low expectations for yourself. You end up just thinking that you're not worthy enough. And we think about this. In these cycles of internalized hatred for yourself, just doesn't impact you, but it also impact your future generations. So think about, as you maneuver life, think about who is in your circle. Who are your friends? Who are the people that you interact with on a daily basis? Think about, do you treat certain people different based on the color of their skin or based on their religious beliefs? Do you typically say racist jokes? So when we think about stereotypes, think of attitudes. When we think of prejudice, think about behaviors. So look up here, you can see there's the level, the matrix of oppression that occurs. As you can see in the first column, it has the social identity categories, then the privileged social group, the bordered social group, the targeted social group, and the isms, which is discrimination. What I want you to see is that we can see basically who are the ones who are considered privileged, right? White people, heterosexual men, upper class individuals, people who are able-bodied, Protestants, and who are adults. So you can see that how this matrix of oppression shows you on who is in power. We have to go back again. We have to understand our founding forefathers. Thomas Jefferson said all men were created equal. But which people was he talking about? Which people were he talking about? He was talking about white Protestant men from Northeastern Europe. Then we know during the Civil War that there was a war between the North and the South. And as Jefferson Davis stated, this country was created for white men. And just think about how these ideas have an impact on why things are the way they are. So we know attitude plus power equals discrimination. Prejudice plus power equals racism. So racist. When you hear the word racist, is one who supports a racist policy through their actions or inaction of expressing a racist idea. So when we talk about institutional, think about organizations, banks, healthcare system, schools, government. That is an example of institutional oppression. So let's think about an example in the healthcare field. Because slaves were considered as subhuman, they experimented on them. So the king of gynecology, Dr. Sims, experimented on Black women slaves. Just imagine the pain that those slaves had to endure because they were trying to figure out the women's anatomy. The Tuskegee Institute, where there were, in the 1930s, where Black men were given syphilis. And then the infant mortality, where Black women are twice as much likely to give birth to a child that is not alive. But this all boils back to the systems that were created in our country, because they thought of Black women as Black people having thick skin, that they were able to tolerate pain, and they had weak lungs. And this is still prevalent today. Education. We've all been able to see the inequities that exist because of COVID. We know that some that's why many school systems want to get kids back in school, primarily is because we know that some kids don't have food at home, that they don't have access to technology, they don't have access to the internet. And if you could think about it, just think of the price per pupil, and that varies from one school district to the next. But think about living in the inner city, where where a price per pupil is $13,789 versus $28,156. Criminal justice, where 1 out of 4 Black men are either in jail or on probation. Religion. Think about Christianity is pretty much the most popular religion in the world. And we know, not pretty much, it is. But just think about how Christianity has been used in this country. Christianity has been used to justify why things are the way they are. And we know that there's been an increase of anti-Semitism because, as you can see, this is status from the FBI, that out of all the religious groups in this country, that most of the religious hatred goes toward people that are Jewish. Poll taxes, voting suppression. So we know poll taxes, literacy tests were done towards people living in the South to try to prevent them from voting. In the 1800s, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1883, which prevented Chinese people which they did not want Chinese people immigrating to this country. And then the Immigration Act of 1924, where they did not want Europeans from Southeast Europe immigrating to this country too. Food scarcity. There are 3 times more supermarkets in affluent neighborhoods. Housing. During the 1930s, after the Great Depression, the HOA sent people out to evaluate cities. And certain areas of the city were considered green, were designated blue and green, which considered as being desirable. And then certain parts of the city was considered red, which is less desirable. And just think about how that impact on our current systems today, on how certain part of the cities are not flourishing because of redlining. And how when integration occurred, where whites start migrating to the suburbs, and how that had an impact in the education. Because of slavery, which a lot of times, the discussion is always saying, well, Black folks should be doing better than what they are. But a lot of times we have to think about this generational wealth. This generational wealth has to boil down to home ownership, and it also boils down to slavery too, where you had families that were able to acquire wealth based on free labor. And we know also with predatory loans, we know that a lot of Blacks were targeted for predatory loans, and that is some of the reasons why that we end up having foreclosure issues over 10 years ago. So when we talk about this norm, we have to understand that we have to start thinking about treating people as individuals. A lot of times when we think about that, we want to talk about when during the 1980s, during the Cosby Show, they said, oh, that is unrealistic for Blacks to grow up in a 2-parent household where the mother is a lawyer and the father is a doctor. Then we talk about Honey Boo Boo and Mama June. A lot of times there were some people who were like, we don't want white people being depicted this way. We don't want that to happen. But we have to understand the reality of the world. There are poor blacks, there are poor whites, there are rich blacks, and there are rich whites. And so when we think about media, media doesn't accurately portray the true realities. When we talk about 59% of the time on the news, 59% of the time they portray blacks as being poor, which in reality is 27%. White families on the news is 17% portrayed as being poor, when the reality is 66%. And blacks are portrayed as being 60% of the time as being the welfare recipients, when it's 42% in real life. Just think about how that cultural oppression has an impact on why things are the way they are. So the question that I have, can Black people be racist? That's the question I want to ask you. So in the chat box, I want you to write down, can Black people be racist? Someone says sure, yes. Okay. Because one thing when we talk about racism, racism really has to do with power. And typically when we think about racism, we always think that, not always, but sometimes we think that because Black people don't have most of the power in this country, that they cannot be racist. Now, so think about it. These are 3 Black men. Some of them were formerly in power, some of them are currently in power. So we think of Ben Carson. Ben Carson is an individual where he was right now, last week, he's tearing down the Obama administration affirmative furthering fair housing rule. He's tearing it down, which means that they're now preventing low-income people from relocating in suburban areas. Same thing, not similar, but a different thing. Ken Blackwell, he was the Secretary of State in Ohio during the 2004 presidential election. After the 2000 election, during, of course, Gore and Bush, we know what happened there. We know that the Help American Vote Act was passed. He did not allow provisional votes to be counted. And just think about how that favored President Bush during that time. Clarence Thomas, he's the only Black man in the Supreme Court. And we know that because Anita Hill, she accused him of sexual harassment. And we know how he was able to obtain power, how he has power now, and he still have vote on legislation that's not definitely is favorable toward people of color. So it is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. James Baldwin. So think about if you're just spending your time, your life overwhelmed with all these barriers of hearing that you're not normal or that you're not right, that just all these messages that you hear from society, how does that impact you? You have anger, you have self-hatred, you become stressful, you start being violent, and there's always an increase of crime because of all the negative messages that you get on a daily basis just because of who you are. So we talked about being racist. Now we're going to talk about non-racist. People would say, I am not a racist, but neither am I against it. So those people who are the same people who say, I'm colorblind, I don't see color. Those are the people who just sit back and don't do anything. An anti-racist, when he or she sees inequities occurring, they stand up for them. They challenge ideas, they challenge policies, they challenge people. They use their position as power. So here's some characteristics of an anti-racist. So Know that we're 99.9% share the same DNA. Doesn't matter about your race, we share the same DNA. If you're going to be an anti-racist, you have to challenge racist policies, practices, and ideas. You have to ignore stereotypes, because stereotypes, you stop making generations about people and look at people as individual. A lot of times, you know, especially when we think about the Asians and Latinx, stop putting them all under one umbrella. China is the largest country in this world. So we know China's have different languages, they have different ethnic groups within China. So we have to treat people like individuals. We have to understand, just because you're not white or you don't speak proper English, that doesn't mean that you're not civilized. Understand, you cannot assign specific behavior to specific races, like black behavior, white behavior, you acting white. You can't, you have to really focus on the individual. Know that this is a lifelong process. You're making the first step. You're seeing that, okay, this is a lifelong process. This is something that I want to do. I want to learn about different cultures. And the term that means that you're want to learn about different cultures and you're constantly learning, it's called cultural humility. So the first thing that you can do in this process, you have to be aware of your biases. Think about who are your friends? How do you treat people? Do you treat people the same? Examine your power. What is your position? Are you a lawyer? Are you a doctor? Are you a manager? Can you use your position to advocate for others? When you see something, say something. If you see a Muslim person, how are you going to stand up and advocate for him or her? Financially, you can financially support organizations to try to create systemic change, like Black Lives Matter. What about the Native Americans? We know that Native Americans, they are very important because they were the first Americans. They only represent less than 2% of the population. And we know that they have been impacted, very much impacted by COVID. Volunteer for organizations, hire and promote people of color, advocate people of color employees. If you see, for example, that they're overwhelmed, advocate on their behalf. Participate in cultural events. Call your legislators for criminal justice reform, or when you see any form of injustice, such as disparity or discriminatory practices. Educate the laws and policies that affect people of color. Organize and fund opportunities for people for directly impacted communities to share their art. So we talked about murals. Help provide funding for that. Provide free housing to activists and organizers. So if there's activists and organizers who are coming for a cause, let them stay in your home. The other thing is that you can attend marches and vigils. You can find remote volunteer opportunities, because we know we're in the COVID era. Support small and local minority businesses. Fight xenophobia. Make sure, like, we know that the word China disease has been used, and we have to understand and we have to advocate for our Asian brothers and sisters. If you see information being put out there, combat it. Get involved in mutual aid networks. Social media fundraising. There's a way that you can also fundraise. Facebook has a social media fundraising. Diversify your media intake. Don't just watch Fox and CNN, watch them both so you can be able to diversify your intake. Right to end cash bail. So politicians, vote, 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 vote. We live in a democracy. It's important for us to vote. You can fundraise for politicians. A lot of times people who want to become elected officials don't have the means to do it. So look for those leaders who don't have money and try to provide funding for them. Run for office. If you see something, if run for office, you're not ordinary. We're all extraordinary people. So if we see injustices happening, we need to learn how to advocate for others. Contribute to college savings plans, to HBCUs. Write to United States Citizen Commissions about lessening the sentences for those people who did not who committed non-violent crimes. So you're doing now, read. Learn about the struggles of people of color. Deepen your understanding of the history of white supremacy and how what happened in this country. Join organizations such as the NAACP, the National Urban League, and there's other organizations that you can also join. Become a mentor, become a sponsor for those individuals. Even start challenging and having these crucial conversations at your job. Books, movies that you can see. When They See Us, The Color of Fear, I'm Not Racist, Am I? Slavery by Another Name, The Reassignment of Black Americans from the Civil War, White Lies We Tell Our Children. So these are some documentaries and books that you can watch. Some books you can read: Courageous Conversations About Race, a field guide for achieving equity in schools. Race Amity, a primer of America's other tradition, National Center for Race Amity. White Privilege, essential readings on the other side of racism. Woke Church, an urgent call for Christians in America to confront racism and injustice. White Fragility, why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Privilege, Power and Difference. Privilege, a reader, raising race questions. And the Neil Jim Crow, mass incarceration in the age of colorblindness. Training, participate in conferences. Whites Confronting Racism Training, People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, White Privilege Conference, and Facing Race Conference. So I'm going to end with this. There are also some things I have that I will also share with you, because I have a allyship on Facebook group that you can join. So I'm going to end with John Lewis. We lost a powerful man last week. He said in his last letter, he wrote, titled, "Together You Redeem the Soul of Our Nation." Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. When historians pick up their pens to write the stories of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. So if you want to contact us, you can do contact@sharpeducationconsulting.com. What I'm going to do right now is we can have a discussion about, if you have any questions, you can take yourselves off of mute and we can be able to have some discussions. Because a lot of times, if you have any questions, if you want to have a discussion of anything that you talk about, we can. Because on the last time when I had how to be an ally, some people wanted to have a discussion. So we can do that now. I can, and if you want to say anything, you can go ahead and create a discussion. Anybody would like to say anything? Anybody want to say anything that they want to contribute to the discussion? Everybody's quiet. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask? So if you don't feel comfortable saying anything, you can write down any other books that you might want to join. You want to say something?
Hi.
Hi.
we're doing, I'm Elizabeth, this is Lisa. We're doing this at our office. And so we're in a healthcare office. And I just, there's been a lot of my friends have shared with me just kind of, in general, even they, and there are people that I went to medical school with don't like going to the doctor because of Tuskegee and all of like the terrible stuff that has happened in the past. And so we're just trying to make a really like warm, welcoming environment here, and want to do that in the best way possible. So I just didn't know if you had any specific recommendations kind of within the healthcare context, about how to kind of be more intentional about what type of healthcare experience this will be. Yeah, I guess that's my question. Thank you.
So one thing I was thinking about is that you need to take an implicit bias assessment. So you can figure out what are your biases? You need to figure out what your biases are. And there are plenty, and if you can send me your information, there are bias tests that exist that you can share with your organization, because you need to figure out where your biases are. Are you treating your clients the same way? You also need to survey your clients. Do they feel as if that they're getting the same treatment? Do they feel like the doctor's actually paying attention to their needs? Those are things that I would do if I were you. Figure out what your biases are, and also start finding out what your clients, how they feel that they're being treated.
And I've done it personally, but we haven't done it organizationally.
That's what you would do. You need to do an assessment so you can find out. But I would try to even figure out how do clients feel?
Mm-hmm. And over what mechanism? Would you do that in person? Would you do that in what way would you want your doctor to kind of what would make you feel good about, your doctor?
Because a lot of times, being as a person of color, and that's, being a person in which I know about 7 years ago, my grandmother died. And one of the things I've noticed is that the treatment that my grandmother received. And a lot of times I was there every day. I took off work, made sure I was there. And a lot of times they don't want you to challenge them. So one thing I know that as doctors, customer service is something that many of them need to really get some more training on, how to interact with people that are different than they are. Don't talk to them, don't belittle them, but really have conversations with them and really take the time to find out what the problem is. A lot of times I didn't see that when taking care of my grandmother. My grandmother died of congestive heart failure. And if I wasn't there, my grandmother probably would have died sooner. And it's just the importance of, how you become an advocate, and even just so they can have a voice. I think even if you having a survey, or even someone can call your patient to find out what kind of treatment that they're getting. I think that one might be something that you can send out a survey, or you can, have someone call and find out, well, how was your hospital experience? What type of suggestions do you have? Do you think that the doctor answered your concerns? Because for me, I had a medical issue, and the doctor said, well, no, you're too young. And then I was so adamant about it. I'm like, yes, I feel like something's wrong. And then when I went, yes, something was wrong. And so it's just, really trying to teach patients how to become advocates for themselves, and just being sure that the healthcare system actually takes the time to listen to their patients.
Thank you.
I mean, did that help you any? If not, I can send you some information too. You can always email me.
That's great. I think it's just about, just continuing to, assess motivations, understand where our natural biases are, even just, between Lisa and I, understanding our level of privilege and kind of how our backgrounds are different, and, what experiences we've had. And I think just being open with people, I'm just, I don't make many assumptions. That's kind of a rule in our office, is that we just don't assume. And so that's, but all of the things that you experience, the reason that we have, we're in a brand new practice, because I did not like some of the care that was being given, kind of the way things were prioritized previously. And so that's something we're just trying to be very intentional about how we move forward.
Perfect. Anybody else have anything to say? Anybody want to have a discussion? Gavin, do you want to say, because I know you have a lot that you type. Would you like to have a contribute to the discussion? Is he gone? He might have left. Gavin.
Hi.
Who said this? PN,
Patricia.
just Patricia. Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to get more involved in the cultural aspect that's going on now, and I have my own definitions, and I just want to run it by you, see if you think I'm on the right track. I'm just trying to be more involved. When I talk about people of color, I include everyone. You know, the people that dominate culture. When I refer to minorities, I'm referring to American people that are Black, descendant of slavery. The term person of color for me is I include everyone, even the Caucasians. And I'm just trying to get more involved and see where I stand. So when I'm discussing these things, I like to think I'm on the right track, doing my research, because people can be very defensive and argue now. And
So when we think about color, I mean, because we have to think about, it goes back to the foundations of our country. Most of the people that reside in this country are white, okay? And race is a social construct, okay? So like I tell people all the time, it's a social construct, and it's a term that's constantly changing. Anyone like Italians, anyone from Southeast Europe, they weren't considered white for a long period of time. The Irish weren't considered white for a long period of time. So it's a social construct, because here's the thing, and Dr. Melissa Pierce, she made a great statement. She said, as a Black person, I know I have white blood in me. And same here, white people there are some white people that have Black blood in them, because you just don't know your true ancestry. And so it's just a social construct. And reason why they're taught, because most people in power are white. That's why they're the dominant, okay? And so so Hispanics or Latinx, they represent probably about 18% of the population. The next is African American, they're 13%. Native Americans, they're around 2%, and the rest of it will be Asians, which is inclusive of anyone from anyone from Asia, and also from people like in India, and also the Asian islands off of China. So they are considered Asian. So race is a social construct. And when we talk about, like I talked about earlier, colorism, it's pretty much, it's based on how you look. Just think about President Obama. Think about President Obama and think about Jennifer Beals, the actress from Flashdance. You know, they're both biracial people, but it's just how people perceive you based on the way that you look. So the reason why we talk about white people are the ones who have the most power in this country, okay? So that's the reason why they're a part of the dominant race.
I know my features are, I am American who is Black, but when other people look at me, they think I'm Hispanic.
Right.
And they're talking to me, I'm like, I don't understand. I am American, Black. Both my parents and grandparents, they were.
So, but that goes back to, like, the biggest thing is that, everyone comes with different hues. And it's because of the mixed ancestry is the reason why we look so diverse. And so it's just, but we know how this concept of whiteness provides you power. The more Eurocentric views you have, the more power that you have. And so, especially in this country, and not just in this country, because we know in Africa and India, they also have issues with colorism, where they're bleaching their skin because they think that white skin is more desirable. So it just really, like I said, we're people. In reality, we're just people, but we just know how. One thing you can learn about, if you want to know where the concept of white started, you need to go read about Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion is the time where the white actually started, because the slaves and the white indentured servants were intermingling with each other. They were working together. And so what happened was, when Bacon developed a multiracial alliance and they start fighting against the Native Americans, the white planters said, no, we can't have this. We can't have whites and Blacks working together. So we said, we're gonna get these poor whites, We're going to tell them that you're free. You will never have to work. You don't have to, you will no longer be an indentured servant. And we're going to say these Black people are going to be slaves for the rest of their lives. So you can do some research about Bacon's Rebellion, and that'll tell you where the concept of white really started in the United States, and how, you know, a lot of times we talk about poor whites and Blacks. I mean, we have more in common than not in common because of, you know, social economic status, but because, you know, their whiteness provided them more power than Black people. Do you get what I'm saying? So, so, you know, one thing, if you want to know about that, just you can see there's plenty of inequities that you can see every day impact people of color just because of the color of their skin. So it's not just about race, it's also about social economics too.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything? You have some quiet people in here. So it says, why, okay, why do you think the George Floyd murder was a watershed moment for white people in America or race? I don't know. I don't know why he was considered as a sacrificial lamb. I think people saw it. I think people saw it. I think that was the
We were all home.
We're all home from COVID. We're still all home because of COVID. I think that was, people saw it. And I think that now, this one thing about these phones, they're good and bad, these cell phones, but now people are able to capture what is really going on in society. And especially that happened to that guy, that Amy Cooper incident that happened in New York, the guy, that bird watcher, what happened to him? And just, so, you know, we just think about, I think people are just tired. People are like, we've been cooped up for months. We probably were in the house probably about 2 months in May. People are like, we've been cooped up in the house and this stuff is going on. So I don't know why, you know. One thing I would say that George Floyd did not die in vain. I mean, he is really bringing to life the purpose of us trying to really move this country forward as much as we should. Anyone else want to say? I see some people, I'm looking at stuff in the chat so I can see if there's anything, because I know some people might feel comfortable putting their thoughts here. So I can give you the Facebook group for those who might be interested, because we have like over 60 people. And that's what I try to do, is because I know that people want, and what I'll do is I'll send it to you, the links, because in here, I'm going to send you this. Let me give you this, a file, because I want you to start thinking about what you can do. And I'll send that to you just as well in a minute, where you have an action plan. And when I want you to really start thinking about what can you start doing every week, where you can read something, where you can, an action you can start doing. Maybe you can call your local legislator. Think about things you can do to start changing what's going on. Because as we have to understand, you know, right now, people, we're so polarized based on politics, right? But we're multidimensional individuals. And we have to figure out how we can start healing as a country. And that's the reason why I'm a former teacher. And so for me, I was like, I need to be in a position where I can have an impact. You know, how can I start advocating for those people who feel like that they don't have any voices? And so that is the reason why I really got into doing this work. Okay, you said it's frustrating because it seems like no one believed us until this point, and there are more than one. Right. So that goes back to police training. We just saw what happened in Colorado last week with that Black family. So until we need white allies, okay? It's the only way that, you know, Black people were able to become free because of abolitionists. So we need white allies. We need people who are going to say, stand up and advocate, because we don't have the power on our own. Yes, we have power, we're in certain positions, but we need a collective effort in order for change to happen. So, you know, any change, when we talk about change for happening, we have to be able to be sure, we have to ensure that we have a team of people that are going to help us meet the cause.
So what do you think about June 1st when Donald Trump played out that little scenario? He turned the military on the people, our children out there. That really made me angry till I was on my phone the next day calling Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
You know,
That's what
that
you
too
do.
hurt.
Right.
Like,
but the more they hear from you, the more that they're going to be forced to change, because you have to understand, a lot of times people, this is where the voting part, a lot of times some people are walking around and don't understand, oh, social studies, that wasn't important. Yes, you needed to learn government. And you need to know the Bill of Rights. You need to know your rights as being citizens in this country. And a lot of times that is not happening. The local and state elections are the ones that directly impact you. Who determines who's going to be mayor, who's going to be the prosecutors, who are going to be judges. So people don't understand that the local and state elections are more important than the federal ones. And so people don't understand that. And that's one thing I've really been doing a lot the last couple of years, is just really informing people about the voting process. And you have to use your right and you have to be informed citizens. That's the biggest thing you have to do. You have to be informed citizens. You have to know what's going on in society. You have to learn how to advocate. You have to call your legislators. If your legislators are not responsive, you call someone else, because they work for you. They don't work for themselves. They work for you. You elect them to advocate on your behalf. And so it's your responsibility. If you have, and there have been times that I've had issues, I've called my congresswoman, and her staff advocating on behalf. You know, I have a senator, which I'm not going to say his name. I've called his office and he was not responsive. So it's your responsibility. They work for you. So definitely so. Anyone else like to say anything? Yes, I will drop the link. Give me 1 second. I could drop the link. I want an evaluation too from you guys. I'll drop the link for the Facebook page for those people who are interested. And then I'm going to drop a link for, the evaluation. I would like to see, how did you think today's presentation was and so forth. So we can, because as a education consulting company, just always thinking about ways to ensure. Here's the group for those who are interested in joining. And then the other thing I'm going to give you is I want you to fill out the evaluation. I want to ensure that this is what you wanted to hear, and if any suggestions that you may have concerning today's webinar. So I'm about to give you the evaluation, and I'll send it to you via email too. Are there any other questions? I'm gonna look at the chat. If some of you want to stay on, that's fine. If some of you want to get off, like I said, we have to have these conversations in order for us to move forward. Please fill out the evaluation, please. If any, I'm still on it to everyone is, and I'll send you all the links too for those individuals. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Tricia. Right, and that's what we have to understand, Gavin. What we have to really start thinking about is that we have to make sure that we keep our Constitution in place. Definitely so. Why, thank you, Gavin. Yeah, we have to think about that. So we have to understand that it doesn't matter which political party you're affiliated with, that you have to make sure that they abide the Constitution. And because otherwise, we want to maintain our democracy. I agree completely. Anyone else has anything else to say? I'll be over here for a couple more minutes for those individuals who have anything else they would like to say. But please fill out the evaluation, because the biggest thing I want to make sure that you're getting what you need, because the whole goal is to really just do these things so we can start impacting change in this country. What do you think is the what? Nancy, what are you talking about? What do you think the best way to?
Sorry, I'm just gonna mute myself.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So I'm curious if you have what your thoughts are on the best way to start conversations with people who are just not quite there yet, like the people in my life who might not be ready to own up to their own privilege and own up to the fact that if they do nothing, they're just feeding into, they're basically racist. The white fragility that exists out there. I very much like to start conversations with people in my life, and I anticipate some strong defensiveness from them. And I'm wondering if there's anyone on the call, anyone who has thoughts on how to start the conversation.
So I host conversations about race in the past. I think a lot of times that people have to understand, and I'll give you that privilege activity too. But just think about, normally if you can do intergroup dialogue. That is a strategy that you can use. You can look up intergroup dialogue, and what you'll do is that you'll have, it's like 3 rounds of questions, and you have to have norms set in place, like, you know, respect one another, you know, let you bring your authentic selves to the table, you know, just different types of norms put in place. But the biggest thing you have to ask them, have you ever been discriminated against based on who you are? You know, just get that type of questions, because a lot of times if you focus on race, people are going to shut down. You know, if you're like, for example, I really focus on, especially if I do presentations, and a lot of times I do presentations and I'm the only Black person there. And so I normally tie it in with immigration. Because I tie it into immigration, because you got to think about your ancestry. Did your grandfather, did he have to change his name when he came to this country? What type of obstacles did he have to encounter? And why did he have to encounter it? Maybe he encountered it because he was Irish. Maybe he encountered it because he was Italian. Because, you know, those individuals weren't considered white for a period of time. You know, just doing that. I think a lot of time is reading is key. And exposing people to reading and statistics so they can see, that have them diversify their media. You know, it's hard to really, the thing is that people have to see it on their own, meaning that reading is going to get people to see, okay, this is, oh, they're not just making it up, this really does exist. And a lot of times there are people who will deny you, deniers, like, oh no, I've worked very hard over the years, that's how I was able to get what I got, but not really taking advantage of their whiteness provided them those opportunities. So I think, you know, maybe some intergroup dialogue, have them to read, because there are different groups out there, Nancy, on Robert DiAngelo's group. They're having, I'm sure there's some that you can find on Eventbrite, where they're having book discussions about this topic. But you know, this is going to be a hard topic because some people are just not ready for it, because people don't want to get uncomfortable, and people just want to sit here and displace the blame on why things are the way they are, instead of that the country was designed that way. I mean, it's an ongoing battle. Do you so I said reading will be good. Having to join a reading group will be good, and do some intergroup dialogue, and just have them start diversifying their media intake. That's the first step. But they have to be willing to do that though, Nancy. And that's one thing, is how do we start converting people to start being more inclusive? And I think the first thing is awareness. You know, they have to be aware of what their privileges are, and they also have to be aware of the struggles that other people have. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Nancy? You can type it if you want to. Anybody else have anything to say? Know that this is not going to be easy work. You know, if you're committed to doing it, it's not going to be easy work at all. And it's not going to be easy because and when I say this, I'm not trying to be offensive at all. America is going to be a minority majority country, and there are some people who are not ready for it. You know, I just was watching something yesterday, and it's like it's the fear of the white race disappearing, which is causing people to react the way that they are. the biggest thing when you talk about, being an anti-racist, you're saying that everyone deserves to be here. For me as a Black woman, all I do is want to have the same opportunity as whites. So it's just really making sure that everyone feels like he or she is included in this country. And I think that's the main goal. But it's hard because some people are not ready to relinquish that power. And just know, if you have one converter, that's one more we convert to the positive side. So it's not going to be an easy battle to fight, because there are some people who are just not willing to relinquish their power. Do you have links to the U.S. map? Oh, I will send you the link from Dr. Jane Elliott. She's a former teacher too, and she's a social justice advocate, and she showed it. I was like, wow. Yeah, people of color are, but it all has to do with so that's where you hear those negative messages make you feel as if that you're not worthwhile. And I don't know what positions some of you are. Some of you are different positions if you're interacting with children. I think just really promoting acceptance. You're appreciating people for who they are. And I think that's the first thing that you have to do. I can, what I'll do, Gavin, I'm going to send you those links. I'll send you the link to the group. Then I'll also send you her video of the map. Is there anything else that people want to say? We have a quiet group. We have people writing in chats, but people might not feel comfortable. Is there any other suggestions that you guys are thinking about? So what I'm gonna have you do, I'm gonna send all those links to you, because I really would like for you guys to start thinking about things that you can do to start, challenging what's going on in this world, especially in this country. I think voting is the first thing that I would tell you guys to do. Try to get people to register to vote. With this pandemic, people are scared to vote. And so just ensuring that mail-in votes, that we can make sure that it's important for us to be able to have everybody's voices to be heard. So voting will be something that I will concentrate first. Reading books, and I have some books that's in the Facebook group, and this is a collaborative effort. So anything that you might have read, and what I'll do, I'll save the chat. If you put down any books that I have not read, I will put that in the book too, to suggest people to also read the book. But I want to make sure that the Facebook group is where we're learning from one another. I'm a work in progress. As I said, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always learning things as I move along. Anybody else would like to say anything while we're here? I think Gavin is the last person on chat. Please fill out the survey, and I'll send that out to you guys too. Oh, Nancy, is called The Bacon's Rebellion. In a book, Bacon's Rebellion, and it's from Howard Zinn. And he has a lot of books, Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn has a book called The History of Our Country. I'll send you that link too. I can send that all in there too, because that's a good book. It's an easy read, and it just talks about Bacon's Rebellion. There's a lot of also now, Coursera, and there's a couple, and I think there's a couple organizations that are doing like free history workshops too, to try to get people to really learn about the past. So that I can send you that link just as well. Is there anything else that anything else that I missed? Shoot. So, anybody else? Well, I appreciate your time spending your nice summer evening with me. I'm going to send you, Bacon's Rebellion. I will send you anything that I will send you the links, in addition to some information about Bacon's Rebellion, some books to read, and the group. If there are any other questions, put them in the chat. If not, I'll see you guys next time that I host something else. I'll send you guys an email.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Good night.
welcome. Good night.